Jack, I trust your keynote on epistemic rupture caused by generative models didn't alienate everyone in attendance. I found your critique of algorithmic determinism compelling, though perhaps unduly alarmist regarding the imminent obsolescence of human creativity.
Alarmist, Selena? I merely articulated the logical trajectory if we continue to abdicate our cognitive responsibilities to systems that lack qualia and genuine intentionality. When we discuss creativity, we must first interrogate the veracity of the output. If a machine, devoid of lived experience, can synthesize prose or compose music indistinguishable from human endeavor, are we not engaged in a grand, collective mummification of authentic expression? This is not mere technological progress, it's an epistemological crisis lurking beneath a veneer of efficiency.
I perceive your reservations, but I believe you are conflating the process with the outcome. The utility of a synthesized symphony is not diminished by the absence of a human composer's angst. Our responsibility, as ethical practitioners, is to establish transparent provenance. If the public is fully appraised that the work is AI-mediated, a sophisticated remix of established patterns, then the value judgment shifts from authorship to application. Furthermore, the AI models themselves become tools, augmenting human capability, not supplanting it entirely. They function as unprecedented conceptual scaffolding.
Scaffolding that rapidly evolves into the entire edifice. That's where the fallacy lies. You speak of transparency, but the complexity of current neural networks renders true transparency practically inscrutable to the layperson, and often even to the developers themselves. We are building black boxes of immense power. Consider the ethical ramifications when these systems begin to operate with a degree of autonomy that necessitates genuine moral decision-making, say in autonomous vehicles or complex financial markets. Where does accountability devolve when the decision tree is too convoluted for human tracing?
Accountability must and will remain with the oversight committees and the corporations that deploy these models. This is precisely why my team is focused on regulatory sandboxes and developing adversarial training protocols. We are not advocating for a total laissez-faire approach. Rather, we must engineer guardrails, hard constraints that prevent emergent, undesirable behaviors. To halt development based on purely speculative dystopian futures would be an act of intellectual timidity that would rob humanity of solutions to genuine, pressing issues like climate modeling or personalized medicine, which demand computational power far exceeding human capacity.
I'm not advocating for a Luddite regression, Selena. Let's be perfectly clear. I am arguing for deliberate pacing, a deceleration calibrated to our societal and ethical capacity to absorb the change. Look at the labor market. We are witnessing an exacerbation of wealth disparity. When AI can generate high-quality legal briefs, marketing copy, and rudimentary software code, what becomes of the vast segment of the professional class whose value proposition was predicated on these very proficiencies? We risk creating a globally dispossessed intellectual proletariat rendered superfluous by efficiency gains that only accrue to the capital-owning elite. This socioeconomic chasm demands immediate attention, not optimistic forecasts about future job reallocation.
The historical precedent suggests amelioration, not permanent displacement. Every major technological leap, from the printing press to the assembly line, has initially caused dislocation, followed by the creation of entirely new, unforeseen sectors. The value will simply shift from execution to conception and curation. Humans will become the architects of the prompts, the validators of the output, and the engineers of the ethical constraints. We need robust social safety nets, universal basic income, perhaps, or reskilling initiatives on an unprecedented scale to navigate the transition, yes. But that's a failure of policy, not a failure of the technology itself. The technology is merely the catalyst.
Catalyst that fundamentally alters the definition of work. If my worth is no longer tied to my unique contribution, my idiom of expression, but merely to my ability to craft an exceptionally refined prompt, does that not fundamentally diminish the human spirit? There is an inherent dignity in the struggle, in the painstaking acquisition of mastery. If AI removes the struggle, it risks removing the intrinsic gratification. We are trading hard-won competence for instant superficial fluency. That trade-off is, in my estimation, ethically dubious.
I would argue that the struggle you romanticize is often just drudgery. Are we truly losing something profound when a radiologist is freed from manually scanning thousands of routine x rays so they can focus their acuity on the genuinely anomalous, complex cases? Are we losing dignity when a small business owner can generate a professional grade website without hiring a six-figure web development firm? Your perspective, Jack, seems to premise human value on difficulty, whereas I premise it on realized potential. AI offers the potential for a renaissance of true intellectual pursuit once the cognitive overhead is managed.
But the overhead itself is what sharpens the intellect. It forces rigor. Let's pivot to the artistic realm, a domain you perhaps concede is more sensitive. When an LLM can generate a compelling narrative, the market is flooded. The signal-to-noise ratio degrades catastrophically. How does a young, aspiring author who has spent years honing their voice, their unique idiolect, compete against an engine that can produce 1 million passable novels overnight? They're drowned out by a tide of synthetic mediocrity. We risked creating a global aesthetic monoculture, devoid of the jagged edges and idiosyncratic brilliance that true human experience imparts.
That saturation necessitates a change in cultural appraisal. We will have to develop new heuristics for discerning value. Perhaps the value will shift from the object itself to the intent and the context of its presentation. The value won't be in the text, but in the human story behind the decision to use that text. A collector might value the curated selection of AI outputs made by a respected critic over a random generation. Furthermore, the AI itself can be used to discover marginalized human voices, sifting through the noise to find the truly idiosyncratic outliers that might otherwise be missed by traditional gatekeepers.
You are proposing a complex layer of meta-curation just to manage the garbage generated by the initial tools. It sounds exhausting. We are constantly building ever more complex systems just to manage the delirious side effects of the systems we built just before. It's a classic example of technological over-engineering leading to a state of perpetual remedial action. Is this truly progress, or merely an intricate form of self-imposed digital servitude? I fear we are prioritizing algorithmic novelty over sustained human flourishing.
Flourishing in the 21st century must include intelligent partnership with technology. Stagnation is the true antithesis of flourishing. We must accept the paradigm shift. The challenge is not if AI will change our world, but how we will steward that change. My proposal hinges on proactive governance, mandatory AI impact assessments, dynamic intellectual property laws that address derivative machine learning, and educational reforms that emphasize critical discernment over rote learning. These are tangible, immediate steps to mitigate the risks you rightly highlight, without abandoning the potential inherent in this epoch-making technology.
Tangible, perhaps, but dependent on global political will, a notoriously unreliable variable. Until those robust frameworks are not just conceptualized, but enforced with inexorability, I will maintain my position. We are moving too fast. We are sacrificing the sanctity of the human creative domain for ephemeral gains in speed and scale. The core ethical tenet must be preserve that which is inherently and exclusively human, even if it is demonstrably less efficient. That is the only bulwark against a future where human contribution becomes merely an optional, nostalgic addendum.
A noble, if perhaps quixotic stance, Jack, but the tide of innovation rarely waits for philosophical consensus. Our duty is to build the seawalls while the water is rising, not merely to critique the velocity of the tide. Let's agree at minimum that the conversation must remain contentious and unremitting. Perhaps that continuous, rigorous debate, the very friction between your humanism and my pragmatism, is the most crucial ethical mechanism we possess.
On that, Selena, we find a rare and welcome congruence. The friction is the indispensable crucible where responsible innovation must be forged. Let the debate continue.